The world we know today is far colder than we realize, yet it's not the frozen wasteland we often think of when we imagine an ice age. The truth is, we're still in it. Yes, the Earth is technically still experiencing an ice age, even though it doesn't look like one. How is that possible? The Ice Age isn't just a singular event that occurred thousands of years ago, with woolly mammoths roaming vast glaciers. It's an ongoing process that has shaped our planet for millions of years. The Ice Age, in scientific terms, began about 2.58 million years ago and continues into the present. This era is known as the Quaternary Ice Age, and it hasn't ended. Even though many of us think the Ice Age ended long ago, the glaciers still exist today, and the Earth is still cooling and warming, in cycles we continue to observe. The current state of the planet, with ice still covering both poles, means that we're living in the midst of an ice age that, for all intents and purposes, is still active. But the perception of the Ice Age, especially in popular culture, is misleading. We've been taught that this period is far behind us, a relic of a distant past. But scientifically, Earth has been in a cold mode for far longer than most realize. Imagine for a moment standing on a frozen plain with glaciers towering in the distance. The air is frigid, the ground solid underfoot with ice. Yet the world around you still carries a sense of life, despite the unrelenting chill. That's the world we are still living in. It's easy to forget that the climate today is not the warm, stable environment we like to think of as normal. In fact, it's the ice, the frozen waters, that define our planet's current state. This ongoing ice age is a phase in a long cycle of Earth's climate history. While glaciers still blanket parts of the world, scientists have found that ice is only one piece of the puzzle. The ice age has fluctuated in intensity throughout history, and it's not as clear-cut as we think. In some periods, glaciers have retreated. In others, they've advanced. This back-and-forth motion has been shaped by numerous factors, from the tilt of the Earth's axis to volcanic eruptions and the movement of the continents. But here's the real twist. Our planet, once in a warmer state, experienced periods where no ice existed at all. Before the Ice Age we know, Earth was free of glaciers, and the climate was dramatically different. The most significant changes didn't happen overnight, but rather in long cycles, pushing the planet between extremes of heat and cold, creating environments where life had to adapt or die. The Ice Age has been a defining element of Earth's identity for millions of years. It's a reminder that nothing about our world is permanent. The glaciers that still exist on Earth are a visible sign of a much larger, ongoing process, and we haven't left the Ice Age behind us. We're still living in it, though we might not always see the evidence around us. Imagine a world completely different from the cold, icy planet we live on today. It's a time when the Earth was free from ice, a time so distant that it feels almost alien. Picture a planet where the polar regions were lush and green, where Antarctica was once home to palm trees, and where ancient crocodiles roamed across its shores. The world that existed millions of years ago was dramatically different. The climate was much warmer than it is today. Imagine vast tropical forests stretching across what we now know as frozen tundra, and swamps and wetlands teeming with life. During the Eocene period, roughly 40 to 34 million years ago, the Earth was warmer by several degrees than it is today, with average global temperatures as much as 5 to 8 degrees Celsius higher. In this world, there was no permanent ice cap, and no glaciers covered the land. The continents were still in motion, and the Earth's ecosystems were flourishing in ways that seem almost unimaginable now. The lush vegetation created a climate where animals thrived. Palms grew in Antarctica, and prehistoric crocodiles basked in the warmth of the southernmost continents. The lush jungles weren't limited to places near the equator. They reached far into what we would now consider icy regions like Alaska and Antarctica. During this period, sea levels were significantly higher, and vast stretches of the Earth's land masses were submerged beneath the ocean. Modern coastlines were unrecognizable, as regions like Florida were underwater. Europe had transformed into a sprawling archipelago, dotted with large and small islands. The Sahara, which we now know as a vast desert, was not dry and barren. It was a humid, active environment, rich with life. The warm temperatures meant that life on land and sea was radically different. The oceans were alive with creatures that today seem like monsters from a bygone age. Early ancestors of whales, like Basilosaurus, swam in the warm seas, their sleek bodies designed for hunting and surviving in the rich aquatic world. The seas were filled with predators. Giant sharks and strange marine reptiles ruled the waters. Above the surface, ancient birds took flight across skies that had yet to know the freezing grip of the Ice Age. As the Earth became warmer, the land itself transformed. Tropical rainforests covered vast areas that we now associate with freezing tundras. The planet's ecosystems evolved rapidly to fit the heat, with animals developing adaptations that suited the humid, wet conditions. Giant, towering trees, rich with dense vegetation, stood as natural fortresses, providing shelter and sustenance to a staggering array of creatures. The warm, rainy climate fueled life at every level, from the smallest insects to the largest predators. But this idyllic world was not meant to last. The same forces that had created the warmth and abundance of life began to shift. As the climate began to change, slowly but surely, Earth started cooling. Glaciers, once absent, began creeping toward the equator. What had been a paradise for warm-loving creatures was starting to slowly fade into the icy, unforgiving reality that would follow. The world was about to face a shift of immense proportions, a transformation that would change the face of the Earth forever. But for now, in the warm glow of the Eocene, the Earth was alive with possibility, free from the cold grip of ice that would later define much of its future. This lost world, bathed in warmth, was a fleeting moment in Earth's long history, a time when life flourished in ways we can only dream of today. The oceans, once calm and filled with mystery, have now become the realm of giants. The seas of the Eocene period, roughly 40 million years ago, were not simply filled with fish and smaller marine creatures. No, these were the waters of some of the most terrifying predators the Earth had ever known. Imagine yourself submerged in the warm, inviting waters of this ancient world, surrounded by creatures whose sheer size and ferocity could send chills down your spine. At the top of this food chain swam the Basilosaurus, a prehistoric whale-like creature that ruled the oceans with terrifying authority. Unlike the peaceful whales of today, these ancient giants were fierce predators, their bodies built for speed and power. Basilosaurus could grow up to 60 feet long with muscular jaws equipped with rows of sharp teeth, perfect for hunting. Its sleek body, designed for streamlined swimming, made it an unstoppable force, cutting through the warm waters in pursuit of prey. This was no gentle giant, it was a predator, fast and relentless, capable of taking on nearly anything in its domain. But the Basilosaurus was not alone. Other ancient cetaceans, similar in form but distinct in their abilities, patrolled the seas, each adapting to its environment in extraordinary ways. The Dorudon, for instance, was a smaller but equally formidable relative, often seen as a more agile counterpart to its larger cousin. These ancient whales were not yet fully evolved into the peaceful baleen-filtering creatures we know today. Instead, they were skilled hunters, using their speed, sharp teeth, and powerful jaws to hunt other marine animals, including smaller cetaceans, fish, and even sharks. And speaking of sharks, the seas of the Eocene were not without their own giants. The Otodus, a precursor to the infamous Megalodon, ruled the oceans with its massive size and terrifying jaws. Imagine a shark over 40 feet long, its teeth the size of a human's hand, designed to tear through the toughest prey. Otodus was a true apex predator, its enormous size making it nearly invincible in its aquatic domain. It patrolled the warm seas, hunting the abundant fish and smaller marine mammals. But the real threat lay in the waters where Basilosaurus and Otodus collided. Both were masters of the sea, but their competition for dominance was inevitable. As these titans of the deep hunted and ruled the oceans, the balance of life in the seas began to shift, not just because of their rivalry, but because of the creatures lurking in the shadows. Ancient sea snakes, many of which grew up to 40 feet in length, became formidable hunters as well. Their long, slithering bodies made them nearly impossible to escape, and their venomous bites could incapacitate anything that came too close. With every passing day, the seas became a battlefield, a place where only the strongest and most adaptable could survive. The competition was fierce, and the creatures of the ocean evolved in ways that allowed them to stay at the top of their game. Yet even with the oceans teeming with such giants, there were still other battles to fight. Battles on land, where different forces were at play. For now, though, these creatures of the deep-held dominion, their massive forms ruling the oceans as the planet prepared for the greatest transition of all, the coming Ice Age. As the Earth began its slow transition from a warm paradise to a more temperate and eventually icy world, life on land faced its own revolution. The seas had already been dominated by ancient cetaceans, sharks, and massive sea snakes, but now it was time for the land to rise to prominence. The creatures of the land, specifically mammals, were about to embark on their own evolutionary journey. The mammalian kingdom that emerged during the Eocene was unlike any we've seen before. Imagine vast plains stretching across the landscape, filled with towering mammals that seemed more like titans than the creatures we know today. At the forefront of this mammalian revolution were the Brontotheres, giant rhinoceros-like creatures with powerful frames and massive horns. These beasts could weigh several tons and stood taller than the average human. Their horns were not just for show. They were used in violent battles for dominance. The Brontotheres dominated the vast open plains, their massive bodies moving through the land, like unstoppable forces of nature. But the Brontotheres were not alone. Alongside them roamed an entire suite of prehistoric giants, all evolving in response to the changing climate and environment. In forests, the early ancestors of elephants, called proboscideans, began their slow evolution into the massive animals we recognize today. Though they were still far from the size of their future descendants, these early elephants were already showing the potential for something massive and awe-inspiring. However, these land giants were not merely a backdrop to the world's changes. They were the new rulers of the Earth's ecosystems, challenging the status quo of the reptiles that had once reigned supreme. The land had been primarily controlled by massive reptiles for eons, but now mammals were rising to take over. Mammals had begun to evolve in response to the new climate, growing larger and more powerful, with specialized adaptations that allowed them to survive in an increasingly diverse and unpredictable world. Among these mammals were the early primates, whose ancestors would eventually give rise to humans. In the dense, wet jungles of the Eocene, these primates moved with agility, their sharp eyes scanning their environment for food, shelter, and threats. Though these early primates were nothing like the humans we are today, their evolution was one of the most significant steps in the planet's history. The jungles themselves were teeming with life, and as mammals began to dominate the landscape, new ecosystems began to form, each one more complex and interconnected than the last. At the same time, life in the oceans began to face its own challenges. The once warm seas were starting to cool, and with it, the creatures of the deep were facing new competition. As the ice ages loomed on the horizon, the Earth's ecosystems would soon change forever. Mammals, now firmly entrenched on land, would be forced to adapt to new conditions, evolving traits to survive the cooling world. The once thriving tropical world was beginning its slow descent into the Ice Age, and the mammalian giants that now dominated the land would soon face the harshest test of all: survival in an unforgiving world. In these moments, the planet was undergoing one of its most profound transformations, an age of mammals, a time when creatures of all sizes rose to meet the challenges of a changing world. From the towering Brontotheres to the early primates moving through dense forests, mammals began to leave their mark on the planet in ways that would forever alter the course of evolution. The Earth, a planet once drenched in warmth, began to cool. The lush jungles, teeming with life, gave way to colder, more barren landscapes. This gradual transformation, unnoticed at first, was the beginning of the end for the warm world that had dominated the Earth for millions of years. As the planet's temperature dropped, glaciers began to form, slowly but surely, creeping toward the equator. The Ice Age, once a distant threat, was now a pressing reality. Imagine yourself standing on the edge of a massive glacier. The temperature has dropped, the winds have shifted, and the warmth of the ancient world is now just a memory. What was once a vibrant, tropical paradise is now frozen, its ecosystems disrupted by the arrival of the ice. It's not just the temperature that's changing. The very balance of life, both on land and in the sea, is being altered in ways that will forever shape the future of the planet. This is no ordinary change. This is the birth of the Ice Age. The glaciers that once only existed at the poles have now spread across the Earth, reshaping the planet in profound ways. The seas, once teeming with life, have begun to freeze. The tropical environments that once supported giants like the Basilosaurus and the Otodus sharks are now becoming inhospitable to many of the creatures that once thrived there. In the oceans, the warm waters are now receding. Marine life is adjusting to the cooling temperatures, but many species that thrived in the warmth of the past are slowly being pushed toward extinction. The sharks and cetaceans that once ruled the seas are now being replaced by creatures that can endure the cold, adapting to a new, harsher reality. The world's oceans, once vibrant and full of life, are now becoming a place where only the hardiest can survive. On land, the impact is even more pronounced. The giant mammals that once roamed the vast plains, such as the brontotheres, are now facing the threat of extinction. The once warm and humid environment they thrived in is transforming into a colder, more temperate world, with winters that are long and brutal. The brontotheres, with their massive bodies and thick skin, may have been suited for the heat, but they were not equipped for the cold. Many of these giants are simply unable to adapt to the new climate, and their numbers begin to dwindle. In the forests, the early primates that had been evolving alongside the mammals are facing a similar crisis. The once lush jungles are being replaced by open savannas, and the early primates must adapt to this new environment. The evolution of mammals, once a story of flourishing growth, is now a story of survival. Only those that can adjust to the cooling world will thrive. Those that cannot will vanish, their legacy lost to the cold grip of the advancing glaciers. The Ice Age has arrived, but it's not just a story of extinction, it's also a story of adaptation. As the glaciers creep across the Earth, some species will survive, evolving new traits to withstand the cold. The mammals that once dominated the planet will be forced to evolve into entirely new forms, better suited for a world covered in ice. For some, survival will mean migrating to warmer regions, while others will develop new behaviors, such as hibernation or thicker coats, to endure the freezing temperatures. As the glaciers advance, the planet's ecosystems are forever changed. The world that was once warm and welcoming has now become a harsh, unforgiving place. The Ice Age has begun, and it will reshape life on Earth in ways that we can still see today. As the planet enters this new phase, one dominated by ice, snow, and freezing temperatures, the world is changing at a rapid pace. The climate is shifting, and the animals that once thrived in the warmth of the Eocene are now adapting to a new, harsher reality. The age of mammals is far from over, but the challenges they face are greater than ever before. The Ice Age may have arrived, but what happens next is up to us. In the distant past, animals had to adapt to their changing environment or face extinction. The planet's temperature fluctuated, creating an ever-changing landscape where survival meant constant evolution. And while many species did not make it through the Ice Age, others, like the woolly mammoth, the saber-toothed tiger, and our own distant ancestors, adapted, thrived, and flourished. But today we stand at a crossroads in Earth's history. The ice that once defined the planet's climate is now retreating. The temperatures are rising once again, and the ice sheets are slowly melting. Our world is warming, and the balance of life on Earth is shifting once more. We are no longer passive observers in the story of our planet. We are active participants. Our actions, whether through the burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, or the rise in greenhouse gases, are altering the course of the climate in ways that will have profound consequences for generations to come. We are driving the Earth's climate toward a new era, one that could be as radical as the transition from a warm planet to an ice-covered world. The question now is not just what will happen in the future, but what role we will play in shaping that future. Will we continue to push the planet toward warming, accelerating the loss of ice and causing species to face extinction once again? Or will we learn from the past and work to preserve the delicate balance of life that has allowed Earth's ecosystems to thrive for millions of years? The challenge we face today is not one of survival, but of responsibility. Unlike the creatures that roamed the Earth before us, we have the ability to change the course of history. We have the technology, the knowledge, and the power to prevent a future where Earth becomes uninhabitable for many species, including our own. The future of life on Earth is now in our hands. Will we rise to the challenge? Will we ensure that the lessons of the past are not lost? As the ice retreats and the planet heats up once again, it is up to us to decide whether the future of Earth will be one of hope and sustainability, or one of irreversible change and loss. The choice is ours.